as well as the description on the back of the book, on the back of the book, the back of the book. But we did not get to reading the book, and so that is what we are going to do today. I'd like to introduce you to the reading set that we have prepared for our readings in the future. First, on the set, we have a little crocheted pumpkin that was given to me by a friend, mainly of my brothers. She crocheted each of us a pumpkin for every Thanksgiving that she was in town. So this one is a yellow pumpkin with a twisty white little stem here at the top. So we have a little crocheted pumpkin. Makes lovely, 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 lovely sounds. So we have a little crocheted pumpkin here on the corner. And we also have a faux plant here. I can't exactly hear what this sounds like. It doesn't really sound like much. But beneath the fern, beneath the faux plant, we have a little fox. So this is our fox plant that I bought from Marshall's. I'm not the biggest fan of glass sounds, but this is what she sounds like. So, this is a little fox, little fox, little fox. The faux plant. So we have a little fox here. We also have an assortment of books here in the back, which you can't see much more other than the base of their spines. All but one of them are hardcover, because I wanted them all to be the same height, but then I ran out of books that were the same height. So I decided to add an extra special book here on the end. And I don't want to spoil what some of them are before we get to reading them. However, I will point a few out as their authors make a guest appearance in the review section. These are books that one day eventually we'll get to reading. But today is not that day because we are focusing on Samantha Shannon's Priory of the Orange Tree. So, lastly, certainly not least because it's my favorite candle, we have a candle here. This is Bath and Body Works Aromatherapy Natural Essential Oils line of candles. I don't think they sell this one particularly anymore. It's lavender and cedar wood. Now, I do my best not to burn this too often because they don't sell it anymore. But it is my absolute favorite candle. It has a very, very calming scent. Very calming scent. It's nice and small as well. So, I have this over here beside my tea. And I suppose because it is in the shot, we have my coaster for my tea. I bought this Hogwarts alumni coaster at Universal Studios in LA when we went on a trip, me and some of my college buddies. as I mentioned, we have a few books here in our collection on the set, that I was going to point out, and this Red Queen special edition red cover was one of them that I wanted to showcase today. So Victoria Aveyard kind of really got me into reading as a whole, thanks to Red Queen and her and Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series. So this is the special cover of Red Queen. I own all the special editions of this series. So on this one we have a beautiful crown with the drips of blood down the front, specifically red blood, which is important context once you start reading the series. But Victoria Aveyard gave her praise for Priory of the Orange Tree, which tells me something decent about the book at the very least. Next, we also have praise from Refinery 29. Kirkus reviews a starred review. Shelf awareness. Book page. As well as Cami Garcia, #1 New York Times best-selling co-author of Beautiful Creatures and author of Unbreakable. Booklist, a starred review. Nicola Griffith, author of Hild. Mary Brennan, award-winning author of the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. Publishers Weekly. Laini Taylor, New York Times best-selling author of The Strange, the Dreamer, and Daughter of Smoke and Bone series. I've been wanting to buy and try reading Strange the Dreamer. I've seen interesting things about it. And I also own the first book in the Daughter of the Smoke and Bone series. One day, those will make their appearances here. We also have a review from the Fantasy Book Review, Marie Brennan, New York Journal of Books, and BuzzFeed. So without further ado, we have the title page of Priory of the Orange Tree, as well as the second title page of Priory of the Orange Tree. Also by this author is the Bone Season series, The Pale Dreamer, a novella, The Bone Season, The Mime Order, The Song of Rising, and On the Merits of Unnaturalness. Something interesting about this book is that it was published by Bloomsbury Publishing, which is located in New York, London, Oxford, New Delhi, and Sydney. It was a little loud. So this is the bookmark I will be using for this book. It is a Fire Sign or Fire Nation bookmark, as you can see here. Fire Sign, Fire Nation. I particularly liked it because within the Avatar The Last Airbender series, I consider myself a firebender. Partially because of my temperament, partially because of how I move as a person, and partially because of the build of my hands. I'm not thick like an earthbender. I have very small hands, but I don't have lean or agile hands like airbenders or waterbenders would. So, the bookmark was in honor of that, as well as the fact that I am a Sagittarius. I'm not huge on moon signs, but I find it fun to be part of a community. So I enjoy that. I feel like when you find somebody that's your sign, even if it's not something you really hold to very seriously, you can kind of connect over that. So that's very fun. But this is the bookmark we'll be using for this book, and that I will be using for this book as I'm reading it. So I'm just going to set that up here. So title page number 2. We have our author's note. have our maps from pre-book pages. I think that's, 5 and 7. Then then map number 1, or the book number 1, I think, is Stories of Old, which starts on page 1. Book number 2, Declare I Dare Not, on page 251. Book number 3, or part 3, A Witch Should Live, page 405. Part 4, Thine is the Queendom, page 505. Part 5, Here Be Dragons, page 621. And I believe this is a very popular line, from How to Train Your Dragon series, but I'm not totally sure. The Keys to the Abyss, part 6, page 715. Then we have The Persons of the Tale, page 805, the glossary, page 821, and the timeline, page 826. And then we have a map. I'm very excited for this map. This is a fantastic map, and so why don't we take a little look at it so we have a bit better of context going into the book. So, I'm going to assume that everything, all of these kind of nation sigils, if you're a critter, align with the country or part of the continent that they are immediately next to. So, up north to the northwest, we have the Queendom of Ineos, which is this small little itty-bitty island up here. We have the Draconic Kingdom of Yskalin, at which there is Gual Bay, the Great Yscali Plain, the Zarga Mountains. So this is kind of the northwest quadrant of this continent. Then to the southwest quadrant of the continent, we have the domain of Lazia, which is very interesting looking. I think an interesting note to take here would be that there is a location called Priory with a whole bunch of trees around it, so I would only imagine that this might be coming into play at some point. We also have the Crimson Desert, the God's Blades, and the Olma Mountains, notably here in the domain of Lazia. To the southeast of the continent, Moveland, we have the Erzir, which is a very beautiful sigil. Some mountains with the rising sun behind it, and a dove kind of cradling the mountains, or the mountains behind it. We have the Little Mountains, the White Waste, the Saras Mountains, the Perla, the Desert of Darania, the Desert of the Unquiet Dream. So, this is the southeast quadrant. If you go all the way south, you can see down here it says, to the area and the gate of Ungulus, which sounds very interesting. I wonder if that'll ever be important. Then we have the northeast quadrant of the continent, the Free State of Mentenden. There's nothing particularly interesting, I think, here. We just have some cities and rivers, but I think all of the notable plains and mountains are spread throughout the other 3 kingdoms on this continent. And then to the far north, we have the Kingdom of Roth. The Kingdom of Roth. It appears to be some kind of mini-continent or island continent of some kind. And we only have one kind of location for it called Elding, which is interesting. And then as for all the seas, the North Sea, we have the Ashen Sea. And between Ineos and the Draconic Kingdom, we have the Swan Strait. Between the Draconic Kingdom and the domain of Lazia, we have the Halassa Sea. To the Carmenta. Between the Erasir and the Free State of Mentendan, along the coast, we have particularly the Gulf of Eden. And then to the far east, we have the Abyss, which we will see on the map on this next page. The Abyss, or maybe the Abyss is just somewhere in the middle. And this is where we have Sekim, which I believe is just this peninsula, the Cebu Peninsula, and this island here. We have the Sundance Sea, which is here. The Unending Sea to the far east, Feather Island to the south, and then this huge megacontinent, or this huge area, the Empire of 12 Lakes. The Empire of the 12 Lakes. So we also have a really interesting picture here of a shooting star. So that is quite interesting. And then on this page, before we start the book, we have the depiction of two dragons. These are Eastern style dragons, ones you would see more throughout Asia. This one in particular without wings but with legs, I believe, is called a worm in official dragon lore. However, this dragon is not exactly a worm because it has wings, which is a different distinction of the worm line of dragons. We have between them some kind of orb, and we have beneath them a blazing ball of what appears to be fire. Very well drawn sketch, more along the lines of line art, which is one of my favorite art styles. And then to the north we have what looks like some form of shooting star, with a trail of light blazing behind it. If you're into music, this might just look like a portion of, I suppose, sheet music, with the lines, the items, the little dots on the lines. Number 1. Stories of old. And I saw an angel coming down out of heaven, having the key to the abyss, and holding in his hand a great chain. He seized the dragon, and that ancient serpent, who is the devil or Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. He threw him into the abyss, and locked and sealed it over him, to keep him from deceiving the nations any more, until the 1,000 years were ended. That is from the Revelations of the Bible, Revelation 21 through 3. Chapter 1. East. And at this point I am going to begin reading in a mixture of whisper and soft spoken. The stranger came out of the sea like a water ghost, barefoot and wearing the scars of his journey. He walked as if drunk through the haze of mist that clung like spider silk to Saki. The stories of old said that water ghosts were doomed to live in silence, that their tongues had shriveled along with their skin, and that all that dressed their bones was seaweed, that they would lurk in the shadows, awaiting to drag the unwary to the heart of the abyss. Dane had not feared those tales since she was a small child. Now her dagger gleamed before her, its curve like a smile, and she fixed her gaze on the figure in the night. When it called to her, she flinched. The clouds released the moonlight they had hidden, enough for him to see, enough for her to see him as he was, and for him to see her. This was no ghost. It was an outsider. She had seen him, and he could not be unseen. He was sunburned, with hair like straw and a dripping beard. The smugglers must have abandoned him to the water and told him to swim the rest of the way. It was clear that he knew nothing of her language, but she understood enough of his to know that he was asking for help, that he wanted to see the warlord of Segi. Her heart was a fistful of thunder. She dared not speak, for to show she knew his language was to forge a link between them. And to betray herself, to betray the fact that just as she was now a witness to his crime, he was a witness to hers. She should be in seclusion, safe behind the walls of the South House, ready to rise, purified, for the most important day of her life. Now she was tainted, soiled beyond redemption, all because she had wanted to immerse herself in the sea once more before choosing day. There were rumors that the great Priory would favor those with the mettle to slip out and seek the waves during seclusion. Instead, he sent this nightmare. All her life, she had been too fortunate. This was her punishment. She held the outsider at bay with the dagger. Faced with death, he began to shake. Her mind became a whirlwind, a whirlpool of possibilities, each more terrible than the last. If she turned this outsider over to the authorities, she would have to reveal that she had broken seclusion. Choosing day might not proceed. The honorable governor of Cape Hyson, this province of Segi, would never allow the gods into a place that might be fouled with the red sickness. It could be weeks before the city was pronounced safe, and by then it would have been decided that the stranger arriving had been an ill omen, and that the next generation of apprentices, not hers, must be given the chance to be riders. It would cost her everything. She could not report him, neither could she abandon him. If he did have the red sickness, letting him roam unchecked would endanger the entire island. There was only one choice. She wrapped a strip of cloth around his face to keep him from breathing out the sickness. Her hands quaked when it was done. She walked him from the black sand of the beach and up the city, keeping as close as she dared, her blade pressed to his back. Cape Hyson was a sleepless port. She steered the outsider through its night markets, past shrines whittled from driftwood, under the strings of blue and white lanterns that had been hung up for choosing day. Her prisoners stared at it all in silence. The dark obscured his features, but she tapped the flat of her blade on his head, forcing him to lower it. All the while, she kept him as far away from others as she could. She had an idea of how to isolate him. An artificial island clung to the cape. It was called Orisma, and it was something of a curiosity to the locals. The trading post had been constructed to house a handful of merchants and scholars from the free state of Mentendan, along with the Lacustrine, who were on the other side of the cape. The Ments alone had been granted permission to continue trading in Seki after the island had been closed to the world. Orisma, that was where she would take the outsider. The torchlit bridge to the trading post was guarded by armed sentries. Few Saganese had permission to enter, and she was not one of them. The only way past the fence was the landing gate, which opened once a year to receive goods from the Mentis ships. Tane led the outsider down to the canal. She could not sneak him into Orisma herself, but she knew a woman who could. Someone who would know exactly where in the trading post to hide him. It had been a long time since Niclay's ruse had received a visitor. He was rationing himself a little wine, trickle of his paltry allowance, when the knock came at his door. Wine was one of his few remaining pleasures in the world, and he had been immersed in breathing in its aroma, savoring that golden moment before the first taste. Now, an interruption, of course. With a sigh, he uprooted himself, grumbling at the sudden throb in his ankle. Gout was back once more to vex him. Another knock. "Oh, do shut up," he murmured. Rain drummed on the roof as he groped for his cane. Plum rain, the Sacanese called it at this time of year, when the air hung thick and damp as a cloud, and fruit swelled on the trees. He limped across the mats, cursing under his breath, and opened the door a fraction of an inch. Standing in the darkness outside was a woman. Dark hair fell to her waist, and she wore a robe patterned with salt flowers. Rain alone could not have made her as wet as she was. "Good evening, Lana Dr. Ruse," she said. Nicolaes raised his eyebrows. "I strongly dislike visitors at this hour, or any hour." He ought to bow, but he had no reason to impress this stranger. "How do you know my name?" "I was told it." No further explanation was forthcoming. "I have one of your countrymen with me. He will stay with you tonight, and I will collect him tomorrow at sunset." "One of my countrymen." His visitor turned her head a little. A silhouette parted ways with a nearby tree. "Smugglers delivered him to Saki," the woman said. "I will take him to the honored governor tomorrow." When the figure came into the light from his house, Nicolaes turned cold. A golden-haired man, just as drenched as the woman, was standing on his threshold. He had never seen in Orisma. 20 people lived in the trading post. He knew every one of their faces and names, and no meant his ships would arrive with newcomers until later in the season. Somehow, these two had entered unseen. "No," Nicolaes stared. "Saint woman, are you trying to involve me in a smuggling operation?" He fumbled for the door. "I cannot hide a trespasser. If anyone knew, one night a year, our heads will be sliced from our shoulders regardless. Good evening." As he made to shut the door, the woman jammed her elbow into the gap. "If you do this," she said, now so close that Nicolaes could feel her breath, "you will be rewarded with silver, as much of it as you can carry." Nicolaes hesitated. Silver was tempting. He had played one too many drunken games of cards with the sentinels, and owed them more than he was likely to make in a lifetime. So far he had stalled their threats with the promise of jewels from the next Mentis shipment, but he knew well that, when it came, there wouldn't be a single wretched jewel on board. Not for the likes of him. His younger self urged him to accept the proposal, if only for the sake of excitement. Before his older, wiser self could intervene, the woman moved away. "I will return tomorrow night," she said. "Do not let him be seen." "Wait," he hissed after her, furious. "Who are you?" She was already gone. With a glance down the street and a growl of frustration, Nicolaes dragged the frightened-looking man into his house. This was madness. If his neighbors realized that he was harboring a trespasser, he would be hauled before a very angry warlord, who was not known for his mercy. Yet here Nicolaes was. He locked the door. Despite the heat, the newcomer was shivering on the mats. His olive skin was burnt across the cheeks, his blue eyes raw from the salt. If only to calm himself, Nicolaes found a blanket he had brought from the Mentenden and handed it to the man, who took it without speaking. He was right to look afraid. "Where did you come from?" Nicolaes asked curtly. I'm sorry, his guest whispered. I don't understand. Are you speaking Sakanese? Inysh. That tongue was one he had not heard in some time. That, Nicholas answered in it, was not Sakanese. That was Mentish. I assumed you were, too. No, sir. I am from Ascalon, came the meek reply. May I ask your name, since I have you to thank for sheltering me? Typical Inysh. Courtesy first. Ruse, Nicholas bit out. Dr. Nicholas Ruse, Master Surgeon, the person whose life you are currently endangering with your presence. The young man stared at him. Doctor, he swallowed. Dr. Nicholas Ruse? Congratulations, boy. The sea water has not impaired your ears. His guest drew a shuddering breath. Dr. Ruse, he said, this is divine providence. The fact that the night of fellowship has brought me to you, of all people. Me, Nicholas frowned. Have we met? He strained his memory to his time in Inyas, but he was sure he had never clasped eyes on this person. Unless he had been drunk at the time, of course. He had often been drunk in Inyas. No, sir, but a friend told me of your name. The man dabbed his face with his sleeve. I was sure I would perish at sea, but seeing you has brought me back to life. Thank the saint. Your saint has no power here, Nicholas muttered. Now, what name do you go by? Sawyard. Master James Sawyard, sir, at your service. I was a squire in the household of Her Majesty Spron Brathnet, Queen of Inyas. Nicholas gritted his jaw. The name struck a white-hot wrath in his gut. A squire. He sat down. Did Spran tire of you, as she tires of all her subjects? Sawyard bristled. If you insult my queen, what will you do? Nicholas looked at him over the rims of his eyeglasses. Perhaps I should call you Trium Dullard. Do you have any notion what they do to outsiders here? Did Sopran send you to die a particularly drawn-out death? Her Majesty does not know I am here. Interesting. Nicholas poured him a cup of wine. Here, he said grudgingly. All of it. Sawyard drank it down. Now, Master Sawyard, this is important, Nicholas continued. How many people have seen you? They made me swim to the shore. I came to a cove first. The sand was black. Sawyard was shivering. A woman found me and led me into the city at knife point. She left me alone in a stable. Then a different woman arrived and bid me follow her. She took me to the sea, and we swam together until we came to a jetty. There was a gate at the end. And was it open? Yes. The woman must know one of the sentinels, must have asked them to leave the landing gate open. Sawyard rubbed his eyes. His time at sea had weathered him, but Nicholas could see now that he was only young, perhaps not even 20. Dr. Ruse, he said, I have come here on a mission of the most importance. I must speak to I will stop you there, Master Sawyard, Nicholas cut in. I have no interest in why you are here, but whatever your reasons, you came here to do it without the permission from any authority, which is folly. If the chief officer finds you and they drag you away for interrogation, I wish to be able to say in all honesty that I have not the faintest idea why you turned up on my doorstep in the middle of the night, thinking you would be welcome in Saki. Sawyard blinked. Chief officer? The Sakanese official in charge of this floating scrapyard, though he seems to think himself a minor god. Do you know what this place is, at least? Arisma, the last western trading post in the east. Its existence is what gave me hope that the warlord might see me. I assure you, Nicholas said, that under no circumstances will Pitsu Nadalma receive a trespasser at his court. What he will do, should he get wind of you, is execute you. Sawyard said nothing. Nicholas briefly considered telling his guest that his rescuer planned to come back for him, perhaps to alert the authorities of his presence. He decided against it. Sawyer might panic and try to flee, and there was nowhere for him to run. Tomorrow. He would be gone tomorrow. Just then Nicolaus heard voices outside. Footsteps clattered on the wooden steps of the dwellings. He felt a quiver in his belly. "Hide," he said, and grasped his cane. Sawyer ducked behind a folding screen. Nicolaus opened the door with a shaking hand. Centuries ago, the first warlord of Saki had signed the Great Edict and closed the island all but the lacustrine and the mentish to protect its people from the draconic plague. Even after the plague abated, the separation had endured. Any outsider who arrived without permission would be put to death, as would anyone who abetted them. In the street, there was no sign of the sentinels, but several of his neighbors had gathered. Nicolaus joined them. "What in the name of the Galleon is happening?" he asked the cook, who was staring at a point above their heads, mouth wide enough to catch butterflies in it. "I recommend not using that particular facial expression in the future, Harold. People might think you a half-wit." "The cruise," the cook breathed. "Look! This had better be—" He trailed off when he saw it. An enormous head towered over the fence of Orisma. It belonged to a creature born of jewel and sea. Cloud steamed from its scales of moonstone so bright they seemed to glow from within. A crest of gem-like droplets glistened on each one. Each eye was a burning star, and each horn was quicksilver, a gleam under the pallid moon. The creature flowed with the grace of a ribbon past the bridge, and took to the skies, light and quiet as a paper kite. A dragon, even as it rose over Cape Pisan, others were ascending from the water, leaving a chill mist in their wake. Nicolaus pressed a hand to the drumbeat in his chest. "Now what," he murmured, "are they doing here?"